I had 36 candles sitting in a paper bag on my kitchen counter the morning my sister sent me the spreadsheet. Not a text, not a phone call, a spreadsheet. It had line items, color-coded. My name in the header cell, bold, like a business memo. Like I was a vendor she needed to invoice before the fiscal quarter closed. The total at the bottom said $7,800. I remember setting my coffee mug down very carefully, the way you do when your hands aren't sure they can hold anything. Let me back up. I'm 31 years old. I work in healthcare administration at a mid-sized hospital outside of Columbus. I have a one-bedroom apartment that I pay for myself, a savings account I built from scratch, and a cat named Fig who does not care about any of this. I am not rich. I am not struggling. I am just someone who did everything right, and somehow that became everyone else's problem to spend. My sister, I'll call her my sister because that's what she is, even when I forget why, is 28. She got engaged 14 months ago to a guy she'd been dating for about 8 months. I liked him fine. He seemed steady. I thought it was fast, but I smiled and I said congratulations and I meant it. What I didn't know was that the moment she got that ring, my name got added to a budget I never agreed to. It started small. It always starts small. She called me about 3 weeks after the engagement to ask if I could help cover her deposit for the venue. Just a loan, she said. I'll pay you back when we sort out the guest list. The deposit was $1,200. I transferred it that same afternoon because she was my sister and I loved her and I thought that's what you did. Then it was the dress. Not the whole dress, just the difference between the dress she wanted and the dress she could technically afford. That was $650. I didn't even see the dress until the day of the wedding. Then engagement photos. The photographer she wanted was $900. She asked if I could split it with our parents. Our parents said they were tight that month. So I paid the $900. Then a bridal shower that our mom kept calling low-key, but somehow required a catering deposit, custom napkins, a flower arrangement that cost $340 alone, and a photo booth rental. I paid for most of it because I was the maid of honor, and I told myself that was just what maid of honor did. Except I wasn't the maid of honor. That's the part I keep coming back to. 6 weeks before the wedding, my sister called me on a Tuesday night and told me, with this careful, practiced tone that told me she'd rehearsed the conversation at least twice, that she had decided to ask her college best friend to be her maid of honor instead. It just makes more sense logistically, she said. You know how busy you are with work. I didn't want to put too much on your plate. I remember sitting very still and asking what that meant for the bridal shower I'd already paid to plan. She said she hoped I would still come. She said it would mean a lot to her. She did not offer to reimburse a single dollar. I went. I sat at a table with my aunt and 2 cousins I barely know, and I watched my sister's college friend give a speech I had been writing in my notes app for 3 weeks. I smiled. I drank 2 glasses of wine. I drove home and did not cry until I was inside my apartment with the door locked. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was being petty. She was stressed. Weddings are stressful. She didn't mean anything by it. I would get over it. And then my birthday came. I turned 31 on a Thursday in October. I had mentioned it to my sister in September, casually, not expecting a party, just mentioning it the way you do with someone who is supposed to be your person. She said, "Oh, that's right. We should do something." I said, "Sure." She said she'd figure something out and get back to me. She never got back to me. I texted her the Wednesday before. She said she'd been swamped with final wedding details. The wedding was still 2 months away. I didn't push. On my actual birthday, I got a text at 11:37 in the morning that said, "Happy birthday. Hope your day is amazing. Wine, it's one ILO." No call, no plan, no follow through on, "We should do something." My parents texted too. My dad called and left a voicemail that was mostly him fumbling to remember how old I was turning. I ordered pad thai from the place down the street. I sat on my couch. Fig sat on my feet. I watched a documentary about national parks and I was fine. I was totally fine. The spreadsheet arrived 4 days later. I opened it on my lunch break, standing in the hospital break room with my phone tilted away from a coworker. The subject line of the email was, "Wedding costs, contribution summary." My name was at the top. Below it was a list. Venue contribution, $200,000. Dress difference, $650. Photographer, $900. Bridal shower venue, $475. Bridal shower catering deposit, $380. Bridal shower flowers, $350. Bridal shower flowers, $350. Bridal shower photo booth, $210. Rehearsal dinner contribution, expected from immediate family, $1,400, day of hair and makeup for bridal party. $255, welcome bags for out-of-town guests. $280, honeymoon fund contribution. $720, and then, at the very bottom, in a slightly different font like it had been added last, wedding weekend hotel block, family rate, 3 nights, $1,000, non-negotiable per hotel contract. Total, $7,800 per hotel contract. Some of it was money I'd already paid. Some of it, the rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon fund, the hotel block, was money she was telling me I still owed. The email said, and I'm going to quote this exactly because I saved it, "I know this is a lot to look at all at once, but I wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about family contributions. Let me know if you have any questions. The remaining balance would be most helpful before the end of the month." The remaining balance. I stood in that break room for probably 4 minutes without moving. My coworker asked if I was okay. I said yes. I put my phone in my pocket. I went back to my desk and I stared at my computer screen, and I did not do any work for the rest of the afternoon. That night, I went through my bank statements. I do this thing when I need to feel in control. I make spreadsheets. Ironic, I know. But I opened my own spreadsheet, the real one, the one that actually reflected my money and my choices. And I added everything up. Over 14 months, from the day my sister got engaged to the day she sent me that email, I had given or spent a total of $4,155 on her wedding. Not counting my own time, not counting the speech I'd written and never got to give, not counting the dress I'd bought for a bridal party role I'd been quietly removed from, $4,155. And she was telling me I still owed nearly $3,700 more. I thought about a lot of things that night. I thought about the deposit I'd sent the afternoon she asked, no hesitation, because she was my sister. I thought about the photo booth at the bridal shower, how she'd laughed and pulled her friend into the frame, and I'd stood to the side and told myself I was happy for her. I thought about my birthday, the pad dye, the documentary, Fig on My Feet. I thought about something she said to me when we were teenagers. We were fighting about something stupid, whose turn it was to do dishes, I think, and she said, "You always have to make everything about yourself." She said it like it was a personality flaw, like needing to be acknowledged was something to be ashamed of. I wonder if she still believes that. The next morning, I called my mom before work. I didn't plan the conversation. I just needed to talk to someone who knew both of us, who knew the whole history of it. My mom listened. She let me read a few of the line items out loud, and then she said, "Well, she's your sister, and weddings are expensive." That was it. That was the whole response. I asked if she thought it was reasonable, the spreadsheet, the number at the bottom. My mom said she thought I should try to see it from my sister's perspective. She said planning a wedding was one of the most stressful things a person could go through. She said family was supposed to support each other. I said she took me off the bridal party and didn't tell me until 6 weeks before the wedding. My mom said she had her reasons. I didn't push further. I knew how that conversation ended. I'd had it in different forms my whole life. The version where I was supposed to be the bigger person. The version where being older by 3 years meant absorbing more. The version where keeping the peace was more important than being honest about the cost of keeping it. I went to work. I did my job. I came home. That evening, I sat down and I wrote a response to the email. It took me about 2 hours. Not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, but because I kept second-guessing whether I had the right to say it. Here's what I eventually sent. I've had a few days to think about this, and I want to be straightforward with you. I've already contributed over $4,000 to your wedding, money I gave willingly because I love you and I wanted to support you. I don't regret that. But I'm not able to contribute additional money to expenses I wasn't consulted on and didn't agree to. I also want to be honest. Stepping back from being maid of honor without a real conversation and then asking me to fund a wedding I'm no longer playing a meaningful role in, that hurt. I'm happy to be there for your wedding day as your sister, but I won't be paying additional costs. I wish you and her fiancé a beautiful wedding. I reread it probably 12 times. I removed 2 sentences that were too sharp. I added one back in because it was true. I hit send. She called me 17 minutes later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I played it the next morning before I'd had coffee, which was a mistake. Her voice was the voice she uses when she thinks she's being calm but is actually furious. Measured, slightly clipped, with a long pause before every third sentence. She said she was shocked. She said she had assumed we were on the same page. She said the spreadsheet wasn't meant to be a demand, just a clarity document so everyone knew what was expected. She said I was making her wedding about myself. There it was. Same sentence, 20 years later. She said she would need to know by Friday whether I was contributing to the remaining costs because the rehearsal dinner deposit was due. She said our parents were already stretched thin. She said she'd really counted on me. I texted her back. I said what I needed to say in my email. My answer isn't changing. She did not respond. Over the next week, things moved the way they move in families when someone has finally said no, slowly at first, then all at once. My mom called and said my sister was devastated. I said I was sorry she was hurting, but that I wasn't going to change my position. My mom said I needed to think about what kind of relationship I wanted with my sister long term. I said I was thinking about exactly that. My dad texted me a single line, "Can you try to make this right for her sake?" I typed back, "I already paid $4,000, Dad. How much more is right?" He didn't respond. My sister's fiancé emailed me, his personal email, not hers, and said he hoped we could resolve things before the wedding. He said my sister was under a lot of pressure. He seemed like he genuinely didn't know the full history of what had been asked of me, and that made me sad in a way I hadn't expected. I was civil to him. I told him I planned to be at the wedding and that I wished them both well. I said the financial piece was between me and my sister. The wedding was a Saturday in December. I drove 3 hours to get there. I wore the dress I bought for the bridal party, the one I'd ordered in the right color before I got the call telling me I was no longer in it. I figured I'd paid enough for that dress. I was going to wear it. It was a beautiful venue. My sister had good taste, I'll give her that. The ceremony was in a converted barn with string lights and eucalyptus garlands and a string quartet that played something classical I didn't recognize. She looked gorgeous. Her friend gave a speech that was funny and warm and clearly written by someone who knew her well. I sat at a table near the back with my aunt and a couple of cousins. I smiled at everyone who came to say hello. I ate the salmon. I drank 1 glass of champagne during the toasts. I hugged my sister briefly when she made her way around the room. She was stiff in a way I felt more than saw, and I told her she looked beautiful, and I meant it. I left before the dancing started. In the car, on the 3-hour drive home, I called my best friend. She answered on the second ring, even though it was almost 11. I didn't talk the whole drive. I talked for maybe 40 minutes, and then we just stayed on the line while I drove through the dark, and the radio played quietly in the background, and I didn't cry. I was okay. Genuinely okay. That surprised me. 3 days after the wedding, my sister texted me, "I hope you had a good time. I noticed you left early." I read it twice. I put my phone face down. I picked it back up. I typed, "I was glad to be there. Congratulations again." She sent back a thumbs up emoji. That was 4 months ago. In those 4 months, I've had time to sit with the whole thing, not in a spiraling way, but in the way you sit with something when you're finally not in the middle of it anymore. I talked to a therapist. I started seeing her about 6 weeks after the wedding, not because I was falling apart, but because I kept catching myself rehearsing conversations in the shower, making arguments to people who weren't there, bracing for fights that might never come. My therapist says that's a pretty classic response to long-term people-pleasing. She says there's a version of giving that comes from love, and a version that comes from fear, and that I'd gotten so good at the second kind that I'd stopped being able to tell them apart. I think she's right. I've thought a lot about the $4,155, not with bitterness, or not only with bitterness. I think when I gave that money, I genuinely wanted to give it. I wanted to be the kind of sister who showed up. The problem wasn't the giving. The problem was that no one was counting it. It didn't register as generosity, just as the baseline expectation. The floor, not the ceiling. I've thought about my mom's voice when she said weddings are expensive, as if the solution to my sister's wedding being expensive was me paying for it. I've thought about the Saturday I turned 31, the pad dye, the documentary, fig on my feet. I've thought about how I didn't cry that night, not because I wasn't sad, but because I'd gotten so used to absorbing things quietly that I couldn't always find the part of myself that knew it was allowed to make a sound. My sister and I don't talk much now. We're not estranged. At Christmas, we sat next to each other at my parents' table, and she showed me photos from her honeymoon, and I said they looked amazing, which they did. But we're not close in the way I used to pretend we were. I think I spent a lot of years building a version of our relationship in my head that was more reciprocal than the one that actually existed. That's not entirely her fault. I made it easy to take me for granted. I filled every silence with a favor. I don't do that anymore. I have $6,000 in savings now that I put away in the last 4 months. 4 months. That's what happens when you stop being someone else's financial buffer. It's not a number I say to make a point. I say it because it still shocks me a little, the concrete weight of what I was carrying. There's something my therapist said that I keep coming back to. She said the hardest part of setting a boundary isn't the moment you set it. It's all the years before, when you kept moving the line. Because every time you moved it, you were teaching people where your actual limit was, and your actual limit was wherever they pushed it to. I'm done moving the line. I want to be clear that I'm not telling this story to make my sister a villain. She's complicated, like everyone is complicated. I've been difficult in my own ways, but I had to stop telling myself that the cost of being loved by my family was accepting whatever they decided I owed. Love isn't a bill. It doesn't come with line items and a due date. My birthday is in October again, obviously. I'll be 32. I've already made plans. A weekend trip with 2 friends from work, a cabin upstate. Nothing elaborate. It's the first birthday in maybe 4 years that I've planned myself without waiting to see what someone else would organize and then quietly grieving when they didn't. There's something about doing that, just deciding what you want and going after it without asking permission, that feels newer to me than it should at 31. But I'll take new whenever I can get it. Fig is asleep on the heating vent next to my desk right now. He's completely unbothered by all of it. I've decided he's the healthiest relationship in my life, and I'm at peace with that. If you've been listening to this and something in it sounds familiar, the quiet math you do, how much you've given and how little was ever counted, I just want you to know that you're not petty for noticing. You're not selfish for wanting it to stop. The fact that you're still showing up, still trying, still hoping for something different, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you someone who loved more than they were loved back. And you're allowed to put that down whenever you're ready. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment when I finally figured that out. My back against the wall, a paper bag with 36 candles on the counter, Fig somewhere nearby, and for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like mine. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently. That's the honest answer. I don't sit around replaying it to punish myself, but I do think about the version of me who transferred that first $1,200 without blinking, and I wonder what she was actually trying to buy. I think she was trying to buy safety. If I was generous enough, helpful enough, easy enough to have around, maybe I wouldn't have to feel the thing I'd always felt just beneath the surface of my relationship with my sister. That I was useful to her in ways that had nothing to do with being loved. That's a hard thing to name about someone in your own family. It's easier to tell yourself you're being dramatic, petty, too sensitive. I told myself all of those things for years, and every time I did, I moved the line a little further in the direction she needed it to go. And she didn't move it. I did. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. No one forced me to send that money. No one held a door shut while I wrote those transfers. I did it because somewhere along the way, I learned that being needed was the closest thing I could get to being wanted, and I confused the two for a very long time. The spreadsheet was actually clarifying in a way I didn't expect, because when I opened it and saw my name at the top of a color-coded document I hadn't agreed to, something shifted. Not rage. It wasn't rage. It was more like recognition. Like a window finally going transparent after being fogged up for years. I could see the whole shape of it from the outside for the first time, and what I saw was this. Every action has a consequence that compounds. I had spent 14 months teaching my sister that I would absorb whatever she needed absorbed, that I would adjust, cover, accommodate, and stay quiet about all of it. The spreadsheet wasn't a betrayal. It was a logical conclusion. She learned that lesson from me. That's the thing no one tells you about the years you spend making yourself smaller for someone else. You think you're being selfless, but you're actually just building a version of the relationship that can't hold the truth of who you are. And eventually, when you finally tell the truth, it breaks. Not because the truth was too much, but because the whole structure was built around its absence. I don't think my sister is a bad person. I think she's someone who got very comfortable with the dynamic I helped create, and when I changed the terms, she didn't know what to do with that. That's real. It's also not my problem to solve anymore. What I know now, and I mean really know it, not just say it, is that genuine integrity isn't about being right in an argument. It's about being honest with yourself long before anything reaches an argument. It's about knowing the difference between giving from a place of love and giving from a place of fear, and having the courage to stop when you realize which one you've been doing. That takes intelligence. Not the kind measured in tests, but the kind that shows up when you finally look at your own patterns without flinching. I saved $6,000 in 4 months. I booked a cabin for my birthday. Fig is asleep on the heating vent. I put the line back where it belongs, and I'm keeping it there.